En þá erum við komin að aðal ræðumanni dagsins eða ræðukonu dagsins og það er hún Dorthe Pedersen frá Danmörku, frá Kaupmannahöfn. Við erum búin að tala Kaupmannahöfn hérna ansi oft í dag en það lítum við mikið til Kaupmannahöfnar þegar við ræðum hjólreiðar. En þetta ekki hefðbundnar hjólreiðar. Það að segja, erindið hennar sko Cykling, uden alder eða hjólreiðan án aldurs og ég veit að hún var með áhugaverðan fyrirlestur hérna í gær á hjúkrunarheimilin í Mörk og ég veit að það var vel mætt þar og það mikill áhugi fyrir þessu í þessum geira. Þannig að það greinilega við erum að útvíkka þetta ekki bara latexklæddir kallmenn yfir fertugu í vellaunum störfum sem geta hjólað, heldur getur allur aldur og bæði kyn hjólað og hún ætlar að sýna okkur svolítið frá þessu verkefni. So, I'm just been telling people how wonderful your product is and you are going to tell us a little bit more about that. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for receiving me here. I know it's always a hard task coming back from a lunch break and having to still pay attention in a conference. But I hope that the journey I'm going to bring you on together with me here today is going to keep you awake. Now, my name is Dorthe Pedersen and I'm from the organization or the movement called Cycling Without Age, which is not only an international movement, but it has national chapters in various countries. The country I'll be speaking about is Denmark because that's where we've initiated the program and I, together with a good friend, Ole Kassow, who was the initiator, has been developing Cycling Without Age over the past 3 years and with a specific spreading effect that we have seen, especially over the past year and a half. But let me first introduce you to my friend Torkil, who is 98. Torkil, sitting on this bench, just a few meters from his nursing home facility, has inspired the world to get people out on their bikes, no matter their age. But he was spotted by a neighbor who decided to offer him good neighborship. This neighbor is an avid cyclist, like many people in Copenhagen. You will see busy streets. And I know that I did make an insult yesterday when I laughed at a person who was telling me that on one of your bridges you had 614 people crossing the other day. And I think my outburst was because this bridge that you're seeing here, we got 40,000 people passing every day in Copenhagen. But please don't feel offended by that. It was just an outburst. I was just so surprised. And it just goes to prove that the cycling culture as such, I don't know much about, but I know how cyclism can also be used for intervention in social areas and challenges, and that is what I'm going to bring out to you today. Ole Kassow, being an avid cyclist, no matter what time of year, he had been meeting this neighbor of his every morning when he was commuting back and forth from work, no matter what time of year. And he looked at this elderly man sitting there, giving him a nice nod and smiling at him every morning, thinking that back in the 30s, he could have been one of these guys cycling wildly around Copenhagen already by then. Or he could have been one of those, or he could have been meeting one of those ladies going to the beach on their bicycles. It only goes to prove that for many, many decades, cycling or the bicycle has been used not only for commuting, but for leisure, for work purposes, and not maybe as much as we have seen over the past few years, where it's been more a sport. In many countries, cyclism is a sport and not a mean of transport as such. But we've got proof that in Denmark, our DNA and our genes has been spreading in different ways when the bicycle was first introduced, because all of a sudden you didn't have to intermarry within your own community. You could also go to the next village. And I don't know if that's the same effect that the bicycle has had here in Iceland. But anyway, let me bring you back to Torkil and his neighbor, Ole Kassow. Ole Kassow, looking at those old pictures and thinking of the freedom of mobility that this gentleman has enjoyed all his life, except now that he's in a nursing home and can only walk out so far with his roller or his walking frame, decided to bring out this old man and his other neighbors back into the community. He just had to figure out a way how to do so. So one day he came up with the idea of renting a rickshaw, and he went across to the nursing home. And I don't know how many of you have ever entered into a nursing home not knowing anyone, not having any relatives or friends staying in there, or someone working that you knew. But offering neighborship to a nursing home, I think, is a quite unique act of kindness. So Ole came across and just knocked on the door and said, "Hello, I'm your neighbor. Would anyone like to come for a bike ride?" See, that could have been the end of Cycling Without Age, which did not actually have a name at the time. But luckily there was a staff member who said, well, let me go and ask in the coffee room. And back she came with Gertrude, who you see here on the left. And along she also went herself, like the staff member. And they went on a ride through the city of Copenhagen. And throughout this journey, which took them down to the waterfront and down to the harbor area, where this lady had spent a lot of her time commuting back and forth to Greenland on a big ship, she was telling her life stories. Within that hour, she was sharing so much of herself, and she was proving such wisdom and such history that we could have not probably found in books, but we had to hear from the person herself. A few days later, Olli was called by the manager, and she was going, are you Olli Casso? Did you take Gertrude out for a bike ride the other day? And of course, he was a bit anxious. Had he done anything bad and had he done something wrong? But the case was, now Gertrude, she had been gossiping back in the coffee room, and now everyone wanted to come out for a ride. So the manager invited Olli to come back and take other people out as well. So he did over and over again, until it became a bit awkward, renting this one bicycle. And he was encouraged by the manager to make contact with the city of Copenhagen. Well, luckily, I was in a position of working with civil society collaboration with elderly and health institutions in Copenhagen at the time. And I was the lucky recipient of this life-changing email asking, could I have a rickshaw for my neighboring nursing home? I would like to pedal and take these elderly neighbors of mine out into the city. I looked at this and I went up to my boss and I said, listen, I think we need to help this guy, but it's not going to do anything good if we just have one bike and one man. We got 40 nursing homes in Copenhagen in total, so we needed a bit more to get things going. And I could see before me a platform that could involve a lot of people in interacting with these elderly people. Because one of the challenges, and I don't know whether you see it here as well, but I think you do, a lot of challenge when people move into nursing homes, they're forgotten about, because we think they're now in an institution where they'll be taken care of. Well, they will be taken care of medically and with the physical training and all that sort of care that our system is there to provide for them. But having social relations and still building friendships with just ordinary people like the rest of us do whenever we go out during the day, they might be isolated from that opportunity now staying in a nursing home. Anyway, she was a fan of the idea, and we went back to Ola and we said, listen, you cannot have one bike, but you can have 5. Could you please help us build this whole network around the bicycle so that we can get a lot of elderly out onto the streets with us? This act of generosity, or this act of kindness that Olli was proving, it soon turned out that a lot of people wanted to do exactly what he was doing. They wanted to be part of this movement, and they wanted to show gratitude, and they wanted to show care for the elderly. And many people had been looking for ways how to do that. And now the bicycle became the technology and became the tool for giving back to our elders of what they have created in our society. That's one of the motivations, but there will be many, and I'll get back to that. So on our first inaugural ride in Copenhagen, we had these 5 brand new bikes out on the streets. But not only that, we realized even on that very first ride that this was a tool to get other co-cyclists, I should call them, coming along with us. So we had 100 people on their own bicycles. Now, we're not talking about those gentlemen 40 plus in their lycra and their sports helmets, but we're talking about just ordinary people, no offense though, but we're just talking about ordinary people who like to go out cycling. And we even had elderly themselves who came along on their bicycles telling us that for quite some time they had not felt very secure about going out on their bikes, because now with age, they were like above 70, with age they felt that the balance and the security and feeling safe on the roads, it wasn't for them anymore. But now going out in a group on a slow ride, that was definitely for them. And speaking of slow rides, other than generosity, going slow is one of our core values, because when you go slow, you experience your surroundings so much more. Even if you just go down the next street, we've got a famous author, we had a famous author in Denmark, Hans Christian Andersen, whom I'm sure you've heard of, and he said, to travel is to live. Now, even going to the next street is bringing life back to these people who otherwise will be isolated from participating in what's going on in their community. So going slow, it brings us closer to people, and it brings us closer to our surroundings. Going slow also brings us closer to what is very, very important to us, and you will see that when you visit our website and when you go and see us on Facebook or Twitter, wherever you would like to follow Cycling Without Age. Storytelling, sharing stories, has got a huge importance. And you see here Torkil and his friend Pia, who've gone out for ice cream, and suddenly the wind broke, and wind in the hair became very obvious on that day. Anyway, it's not just sharing stories between the people who are sitting in front and our passengers, but it's also sharing stories with the one who's the pilot. It's very easy on these fantastic rickshaws for the pilot to like lean forward and have a little chat, stop in a nice place, look at the view, discuss a concert that's going on in the street or whatever you might be going out. And again, to be sharing what's important to you in life. In that way, we create relations, not only for the people in front of the carriage, not only between generations, which is quite severe, that we have this cross-generation effect. Elderly and younger people get together because they all like bicycling, but it's also the people we meet on the street. People get really seriously curious because they can see it's not just a tourist ride. They can see it's about something here, because those in front, they're around 90 years old, most of them. And why is it so important to share stories and build new relations once you're 80 or 90 or even 100? We got passengers at 105, I think is the oldest passenger so far. And it's all about having witnesses to your life and having people who witness your life stories, someone with whom you can share not only what took place back in 52 when you were a youngster, but also what is happening in an aging life, what is happening for an old person with all the changes that age brings us and all the worries that we have about our families, about our life situation, about maybe sickness or disease or all these things you just need people to share with. And of course, with age, those you've known through your life might not be there with you anymore because you might have lost some of them. And you might have moved, of course, into a nursing home, and changing your location, it also minimizes your opportunity to keep related to the people who used to be your neighbors. Now we even witness that old friends become new friends. And this story is from Canada, where you meet Heather and Winnie, who you see in the picture here. I was in Canada just 2 weeks ago, setting up Cycling Without Age in this nursing home in St. John in New Brunswick. And it turned out that Heather, who was the pilot, she had been taking Winnie around just the parking lot because this was just a training session, but they hadn't really spoken yet until she jumped off the bike and went across, and she goes, "Winnie, but that's you. I recognize your voice." And so it happened that Winnie was Heather's childhood friend's mother, and she literally lived in Winnie's house when she was a teenager, and befriending Winnie's daughter. And now the bicycle was a tool that brought them back together again. And they can now again, they've not seen each other for 20 years, but they can now again become witnesses to each other's lives on this bicycle. So such friendships grow out of just being interested in cycling or just being interested in going out. It doesn't even have to be an interest of actually cycling, but the bicycle is the tool that brings the people together and brings people out back into the community. You see Ole and Torkil, I don't know, this is like a very unlikely friendship because there's like 50 years between the two gentlemen, but nevertheless, they go out together, and especially on Torkil's birthday, they go out and have a big glass of wine. Now, where does this Without Age name come from? I think we've come to realize that Cycling Without Age is much more than just a bike ride. It's about providing an opportunity where the resources that each person has, the capacity that we all have within, but we might be in a situation where we cannot put it across to other people because we are isolated or because we are expected to have a special role now that we are just a citizen in a nursing home. We realize that on this bicycle, all those capacities are blossoming and coming out vividly. So Without Age proves that no matter if you're 12 or you are 90, you can, through those relations that you can have around cycling, lots of things can happen. And as you can see, it's a pleasure for everyone, no matter what age, to be important to someone else. Even if you're 90, you still want to be able to take care of someone or help someone or be good to someone, because we know that when we do something good to others, it's also a pleasure for ourselves. We get so much, it's a big award to ourselves because it becomes mutual and the good times just sort of come back to you. Here you see one of the old ladies, like she's 90 something, and she's holding on to balance the bicycle because she can see that her friend, who has a broken ankle and nevertheless came on a long trip from Denmark to Norway for 5 days in a rickshaw, she's getting help from one of the volunteers and one of the staff members. But she thinks that even if they're doing all their best, she can still help balance the bicycle. Or have a look at Knud here, who is a former bike mechanic. Obviously, he's not anymore. He suffers slightly from dementia, and he lives in a nursing home, and he gets really confused and frustrated sometimes. But being out on this rickshaw, that spoke to the identity in him. He's been working with bicycles forever. He's been the handy guy who has been handling and tackling and repairing bicycles and helping people with stuff. And all of a sudden, that role, he could play that role again while interacting with the pilots, the volunteers, and of course, the staff members. So it's all about being able to help others and help yourself through that. It's just a way of being part of the community. I don't think any of us, I mean, we're all going down the same path. We're all aging, and none of us would like to see ahead of us that we're going to be isolated from friends of the community or the opportunities that our cities provide us. But before I speak on, I would like to take you on a little ride with Torkild. Let me see. Now the sound worked just before.